Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
ESN Smart Nitrogen is a controlled release fertilizer that responds to the same environmental cues as your crops and protects nitrogen from heavy rain, overly dry conditions, and microbial attacks caused by standing water. When temperatures rise, ESN's polymer coating releases nitrogen over 50 to 80 days. Normal urea dissolves in just a few hours, leaving it vulnerable to loss. With ESN, your crops get the nitrogen they need when they need it most.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have a power duo with me. I have Elaine Froese, farm family coach, and I have Brent VanParys, a partner with BDO and a farm transition specialist. Welcome.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
I am so excited to have you guys, and today I'm extra excited because we are covering the tough questions on transition planning. So are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Yes, let's go.
I'm ready. So you guys work with farm families right across Canada. You have so much experience. You've heard so much. I want to take and ask you and review some of the hardest questions, some of those uncomfortable areas that I want to address so that we can start to do transition planning. So we're going to dive right in. And this is my hodgepodge of questions. We're going to start with multiple siblings in farm families. In so many farm families, there are 1 children, 2 children, 4, 10 children. And sometimes it works out great that one wants to farm and others don't. Sometimes I've heard you say an example, 10 children that want to farm. What's the tough love and what have you experienced with multiple siblings trying to farm?
It runs the gamut. We've had situations where the oldest child is entitled to farm, and if that child decides not to farm, it might fall to the next one. I've seen situations where the youngest child was the most capable and everybody recognized that, and so that child led the farm. And all situations in between. I think what you have to do is try to move that into the business circle, separate that from the family. Okay. As a parent, you want to nurture and love and encourage and give them the best opportunity for success, but that may conflict with the ability of the business to sustain that number of families or that number of people. So it's not easy. We have we have an exercise called family participation policies, where we develop the policies by which family members can have a career at the business, how they develop their skills, how they move up in the business, how they become leaders, and eventually how they become owners. And part of that helps to identify those family members, those children that will actually be able to lead the farm business and will have a successful career there.
Another approach too, Tracy, is asking, we've heard of families having 2 or 3 sons who all want to come back or be on the farm, and the father just said, that's fine. You have 2 months to come back with a business plan and show me what you want to do in this business.
I love that.
And then that way it was almost an elimination game, so to speak, and only 2 of the 3 sons came back with a business plan.
Wow. What is that called? Putting your mouth where your money is? Money where your mouth is? Action?
It's called talk does not cook rice.
Okay, there we go. Any way we say it, that's great.
It demonstrates capability, the ability to think at a higher level, strategic level, a management level. Those are the people that are going to succeed in the farm.
And I like that because I always bounce in and out of the farming world. I'm a farmer and I also own Farm Marketer, so I bounce in and out, and if anybody comes into my company, they apply for the job.
Yes.
There's not the assumption they're getting it. It's you apply and you prove your case. So I like that where the dad said, okay, prove it, and who's going to show up with a business plan? They kind of self-qualify there.
Well, in those family participation policies, often in families have a policy where you have to go out and work someplace else.
I like
You
that.
have to have an education relevant to the business. Oh, and the business has to need your particular skill and you at the time.
Ooh,
And if we don't, well, you know, you may have to work someplace else.
okay. That's business, right?
It is business.
Excellent.
Trouble is, that business circle and that family circle overlap, and that's very difficult for families.
It is. For our audience, you work with your system. Can you quickly explain that is it 4-part system? 3-part?
3 circles and a triangle. And
Oh, yes.
And it's not mine. It was developed by a couple of Harvard professors by the name of Renato Tagiri and John Davis. And it's brilliant. It was done in the 80s, and it's been a very robust model for helping families understand the special nature of their relationships being in business together.
Okay.
And so the 3 systems would be the family system, which has an objective of nurturing and loving. It's a safe place and people are equal in that system. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
And the business system, where people are theoretically supposed to earn their way in and accomplish things. It's a hard measurement, tough decisions are based on fact and some intuition, but it's a very different environment. And the ownership circle, which is surprisingly different because it deals with the protection of the family wealth, the stewardship of the family assets, and eventually the passing on of the family wealth. Those systems are very different, but they do overlap and they impact each other.
And then it gets messy when there's not a clear separation or an understanding. So the model is helpful for saying, is this a family issue that we're trying to resolve here in this transition plan? Or is this a business? Is this something we should put more on the operations?
Which hat are you wearing when you're
Yes.
trying
Are
to
you
make
my
this
mother
decision?
or are you my business partner?
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
But you know, that's neat because that's boundaries, right?
Right.
The other system is yourself.
And
Yourself.
that's the triangle.
Preparing yourself for transition or whatever change is coming along. Preparing, making sure you understand your journey and your motivations and how you're going to cope with whether you're coming into the business or whether you're exiting the business, or whether you're suddenly going to become partners with your children or your brothers
So
and sisters.
there's an interesting example yesterday, Tracy, at our seminar that Brent and I did together just before the farm show. A young farmer, dairy farmer, said, Elaine, we had the meeting beside the baler. And I go, seriously? He said, yes. On Thursday, we had the meeting beside the baler, and on Friday, a week later, my parents had a new house. And
Wow.
what Brent's talking about is the dad, he needs some self-work in terms of his ability to let go, because now there's fear around whether the plan is going to be changed yet again.
Oh.
So there's that. As a farm family coach, I would just encourage your listeners to do a lot of work on professional and personal develop themselves, being emotionally strong, working on better conflict resolution, and being better communicators.
Wow.
And being clear about what they want for themselves.
And that's a hard one.
Somebody that's worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week for their life, all of a sudden is
Or
looking
100.
at replacing those hours with something.
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
I don't blame
A
them.
lot of their self-esteem and personal identity is connected to that farm.
Yeah.
And so, okay, is there a way we can stay connected with the farm but still allow the next generation to flourish, to succeed? Or should I remove myself and go off and do other things? Can I have a second stage to my career or my life that is fulfilling and purposeful and rewarding?
See, I look at a lot of the farmers that I know and families and transition planning, and I also walk that line of old enough, young enough. I love what I do. Love, love, love. Granted, I have a few years to get to retirement, but if I feel how I feel about what I do over there, why do I want to leave? And now flipping to the farm, I look out and I just love this farm so much. I can understand at 60 your life work and you really kind of feel like you're just in your prime and you gotta go. I think that's where the onus is probably to have that strong plan. What's the next stage look like for you? You don't have to go, or you are gonna go, right?
We often work with the senior generation, Generation 1 as I call them, or the founder generation, to actually describe their career path and the roles that they want. Some of the farmers will say, just put me in a combine and leave me out of the rest of the details. You person, you've got your skills, you've got energy, you deal with that, just put me on a combine. I love that. Others will want to take an oversight role, maybe a more strategic role. The key is, I think, is to allow the next generation to expand their knowledge and their responsibilities.
And their roles.
Take some risk.
Yeah.
Maybe fail a little bit. And develop together into your new roles.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to move on to the next question. And I see this quite a bit. And I want to kind of do some pen and paper, hard math. Let's be realistic here. We have an operation, and often there's multiple children that want to be part of it. But we know X operation as it sits brings in this many dollars, and it has to pay these bills. At the end of the day, there's this much left for wages, blah, blah, blah. What do you guys see or recommend about an operation and assessing, deciding, long-winded question, but how do we work with multiple children, multiple families that want to farm on one operation? That's a loaded question.
So the question is, how many families can this farm support?
Look at you. That is precise. That's exactly the question.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, that is exactly the question.
Yes.
And it's somewhat of a mathematical exercise, because you can, if the current generation, the next generation know what they expect financially out of the farm, whether it be the equity withdrawal and the sustaining of the lifestyle of the exiting generation, or the lifestyle requirements of the entering generation, the farm produces so much. Fairly easy to predict what kind of cash flow within a reasonable tolerance. That is a mathematical exercise, an accounting exercise. So that's a fact, right? It's hard, it's not disputable.
I love it. That's very easy. Yeah.
So if you want to bring more of your family into the business, then the business will have to change.
Generate more cash.
It'll have to expand, it may have to diversify into other operations, it may have to do something to generate more income if you're going to have more family members dependent on its results. If it's kind of status quo or slow growth, then the fact is you can't sustain that many people.
And the other part of the conversation on the family circle side, Tracy, is the different stages of the family members. So you may have a brother who has no family, a brother who has a wife and children, and a brother who lives very frugally, and a brother who doesn't live quite so frugally. So there's a whole other communication, conflict resolution conversation with the family dynamic.
Wow.
Irrespective of the cash flow, because obviously money is money in terms of what people expect for a fair living income. Right.
Yeah.
So income stream for me as a farm family coach is my first question. So what do you need for an income stream to live at the level that you would like to live at? Mom and dad, what do you need? And next gen, however many successors there are, what do you need? It's a very interesting question. And if they say $30,000, no. That
doesn't get you very far
That's
anymore.
right. What are you going to do after March?
Yeah.
Right. So as a home economist, that's my background degree, and I'm very concerned about quality of life, because I had one young woman who would cry every time she had to go and buy diapers, because she was never sure that she'd get enough money to pay for those diapers. And I said, this is ridiculous. Why aren't you asking for more income from your farm and having that conversation?
Wow. Okay. I heard you share a concept of right sizing. Did I get that correct?
Yep.
Right sizing your farm. Do you want to share on that?
Is that like downsizing, Brent?
Sometimes. It could be upsizing as well, depending on what the needs of the family and the aspirations of those who are running it. But I see, and it's not just the agricultural sector, I see lots of times it's kind of 40 to 50 somethings that have been very successful and are driven in achieving things, yet they haven't really taken thought or take an inventory of what size of business they've got. Everything's funneling through them, and they are stressed to the nines.
Yeah.
Typically overworked. They may not have built a management structure and a labor strategy that can actually manage this business. They are taxed terribly. But the tendency in agriculture is to grow and expand your land base, keep on growing, and without thought for, is this what I want in my life? Is this maximizing my personal life? Is it good for my family? Is it good for my psychological disposition?
If we aren't growing, we're going backwards. Don't you know that?
That's the old adage, isn't it?
Oh, I just
Yeah,
hate
for
that
sure.
saying. I just hate that saying. I heard it again in Saskatchewan. Sorry, Saskatchewan.
Yet maybe if you, I know this is blasphemy, but if you sold a quarter, you might have a little money in the bank. You wouldn't have to have so much iron, and you could maybe be fair to your other children eventually, and it eases things up a little bit.
Take your foot
Possibly.
off the gas.
That may not be the right answer, but it is one possibility. And so I think farmers need to be open to that. What is the right size for the business for the people that are operating it and the families that are dependent on it?
Well, I'll share a personal experience because Anthony and myself are the same thing. We have aggressively grown our cow-calf operation, bought land, built a nice size operation fairly quick. And as you know, you keep on going. Sometimes you need more land, more equipment, and it just spirals, right? So we actually took a step back and we said, do we need more cows? Do we need more land? Does it make sense to sell this? And you know, it's silly. I am a black and white math person, but sometimes there's a little ego that comes in. Well, I own this many acres and I own this many cows. Do I want to go backwards? I'm admitting it. I have to do it because I think there's so many out there, myself included, that we want to grow, but we don't realize every level of growth adds more stress, more debt. And the other thing, do you want to be an employer? That's one thing too. We're looking at that. Okay, if we go to the next level, Anthony is now an employer. Is that something that he wants to do?
So the question typically I ask concisely is, how big is big enough?
It's never big enough, Elaine.
Well, and that's the joke I use when I'm speaking, that my husband says, oh, just a little bigger than the neighbors. Well, my husband doesn't really say that, just for the record, but
The Joneses.
Good line, though.
that's
Yeah.
the line, right? The competitive nature of growth. And it also, in terms of what the other question was about roles, is if you're an entrepreneur and you like being a deal maker, you can be a deal maker for other companies, not just the farm. And I know a dairy farmer who transitioned his cow herd to his son when he was 50, because he'd already milked cows for 30 years. But his life was not over at 50.
No.
He said, Elaine, I'm
That's
going to
young.
start another business.
Right on.
So that's what's so great about coaching, is you discover that you have way lots of different options.
Now, some of the farmers are actually building their operation, their land base, their cattle, their inventory, all the things they're doing for the next generation and the next generation.
It's called the successor effect.
Those are absolutely fantastic goals, and they're far looking. It's very insightful. However, they have a challenge in actually managing it or building the management structure to run it. And just, do you want to become an employer? But to run an operation that size, you may need to become an employer, and you may need to observe health and safety legislation and Employment Standards Act and have the payrolls and all the concerns with having people.
Yeah, and
Which
that
is okay.
changes. It's
That's
good.
business.
It
That's
changes
business.
it. Yeah. And I've gone through various levels of growth at Farm Marketer too. And sometimes if you love just doing your thing and you grow and you have employees, and now it becomes managing those individuals.
Now I don't like what I do. Possibly.
Possibly.
Or now I love what I do.
That happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, and same thing with farmers. They love the land, they love seeding. Now all of a sudden they're so big, they're stuck in an office, and they're managing paperwork and people, and we all know people have their demands, right?
I actually have a family that I worked with that went from 22,000 acres back down to 8,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did they feel?
Great, because when he was at 22,000, he was crying. And he said, Elaine, I can't take this anymore. I said, you don't have to do this. Who told you? Where is it written that you have to be a big farmer?
We sometimes don't stop and think. We always think forward, grow, right?
From the family wealth point of view, all that person did was take assets of one type, put it into assets of another type, and then maybe created the position that was better for them personally.
Smart.
Yeah. The other thing that maybe can help with the tendency to buy land or to buy that or to impulsively expand is developing a longer term business plan. Strategically, what are we trying to achieve? And when you're looking at the next generation coming in, agreeing on that is critical. What do we see out there? And what does it look like? What are we trying to achieve? So when it comes for decisions on buying that next quarter of land or expanding into that entity, it's in conjunction with this strategic plan rather than the impulsive or the point of view at the time, that day.
Sounded like a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's just natural. Land comes up, it's a great investment, let's grow, versus that's not part of the plan.
They don't make any more land.
Right. They don't make any more, you gotta buy it while it's available. It's a habit, I think.
It's been brilliant over the last 20 years, right? 30
And a
years.
great investment, you can't argue
Absolutely, it
that.
has been.
Yeah.
Well, but that part too, to your point, is the wealth management side. Real Good talks also about having a personal wealth bubble, not just the land wealth bubble. And I think underlying this conversation, Tracy, with multiple siblings is the fact of what does fairness look like? And I am working very hard as a farm family coach to change the mindset of fairness to what does every person in the family need to be successful?
Okay.
And that may or may not be a capital asset.
Okay.
And if you have taken assets that would maybe be invested in land and invested in something else that's not farm related, it becomes easier to fund fair.
Like a real estate piece or a cabin at the lake or something totally separate.
Something that doesn't get merged into the farm operation, that gets factored into profitability, that all of a sudden when it's time to do succession, transition planning, that piece that was supposed to be an investment because it was great is now part of the farm and it can't be broken up. So we didn't accomplish this goal.
And we don't want to go backwards. That's something that is ingrained into the farming psyche, as Elaine said. But imagine this, what happens if you say to your children that are going to farm, maybe you can't start here. Maybe we're gonna take some of that land or some of those assets, we're gonna turn them into cash or investments, and we're gonna get you to start here. Then you can build it and you can go past us.
And have the joy of growing.
That's right.
Which is, I think, all the fun.
You don't have to start here. You can start here and go past that. Who says you have to start here? Because we do have to be
That's
fair
neat.
to your other children.
That's a neat idea.
It's right sizing.
But there's also decluttering your farm. I remember the story of the young farmer of Nova Scotia. His name's Colin Brown. He went to C-Team. He came back to Nova Scotia and he actually cleaned up the farm. And he found $300,000 worth of iron sitting in places where it was no longer being used. And so when you get creative with a facilitator and a strategy person like Brent, you can come up with all kinds of ways to generate revenue that you weren't even thinking of.
This is fantastic.
Well, that's what you learn by looking at options.
I love it. Okay, so that is some good stuff. Where I want to move to next. Again, I bounce in and out of the farm world, and for a marketer, when I'm hiring people, I'm always looking for the most qualified individual. Now, let's move to the farm, and correct me if I'm wrong, because we're blood and we want it to be a family farm operation. I think there's a lot of assumptions, rightfully so, that the children are going to take over. But I almost wonder, with those assumptions, are we being a little bit complacent? And I go to the work world. When I'm looking to move up in my career in the work world, I'm upgrading, I'm going to university, I'm aggressively improving myself. And not that farmers don't, but what do you guys see in terms of children qualifying themselves? And then let's go to the flip side of that. What do you guys recommend for parents to make sure that the kids are qualified to take over? Who would like to answer that one?
Go ahead, Elaine. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking of a young woman that is very good in accounting and very educated and working her way into the farm business, which is a multi-layered kind of business. And her frustration is gender bias from
Okay.
her parents. And when you say children, I think we also have to change the language. Once your child becomes an adult,
Oh, shame on me.
sorry,
Yes,
Travis,
no, you're right.
While you're calling them children, yes, of
Yes.
course, but I would put an adjective, adult children.
Adult
So
children.
let's just call them adult business partners, because again, as Brent talked earlier
You're
about
right.
the three-circle market, when Ian, my son, he's my son and always will be, and that will never shift. So I say it always, father-son relationship will always be father-son. But then I put my hands like this, and this means shoulder to shoulder. This is Ian at 30 and his father at 62. But they're business partners, so they're now shoulder to shoulder. And the way we have encouraged our son is, first of all, we did personal style indicators on them. So as a coach, I did it on him, his girlfriend, who is now his wife.
Okay.
I had no idea they were getting engaged. It was a bit of an interesting family meeting. And then my husband and myself, so that we understand how we are wired, personal styles, and how we show up towards people and tasks and details. So you can do personal self-assessment like that. We also encourage peer networking groups. So in our farm, Ian belongs to the Killarney Farm Marketing Group, and so he's got other young farmers that he's learning and growing with. He loved to go to university. He has an ag degree or a diploma. My husband has a degree. So to me, Tracy, it has to be intentional, and it has to be complementary to how that person is wired. So my daughter-in-law is a nurse and is very high for detail. So guess where we're encouraging her to develop her skill set? In the office administration, because that's what she's bent towards.
Excellent.
But it just doesn't drift along. You have to engage in the opportunities for training that you pursue.
Well, and flipping over into for marketer, whenever I hire a new hire, I actually do 2 different tests on them to see if they are right for the position, and then also who they are. Because some jobs are just meant for certain people, and other jobs are not. For example, I could do accounting. I would be miserable in accounting. I'm not wired that way.
And here's Brent.
Yeah, no.
But you know what I mean? If all of a sudden a farm child gets pushed into that area because that's the default, they're going to be miserable. When maybe 2 adult children,
I just call them successors or next gen.
2 next gen individuals, maybe they just even need to switch.
There's another way you might go about this, a complementary way that would involve some kinds of strengths testing or attribute testing. But we talked about a business plan, the longer range business plan. We know where we're going. Out of that, you can actually kind of look at, well, what kind of roles does it take to be successful in the business that we're trying to create?
Love it.
And it might be around human resources and finance and possibly sales, agronomy, equipment and facilities management. And then, okay, well, what are the skills you need in those roles?
Right.
We're not talking about people yet, no names.
Right.
What are the skills, what are the attributes, what kind of people would we put in those roles? Now, you look to your children. Do you aspire to any of those roles? Yes, I would like to be the facilities and equipment manager. Excellent, okay.
Sounds like a good title.
Yeah, and how are you going to develop into that? Here's what we think it takes. So let's develop a plan for you to get to the skills that it takes to be that.
Which I call a learning plan.
Sure,
I like
it's a
that.
learning plan, a development plan, or a great term.
And no matter what size your farming operation is, you may have to wear multiple of those hats, and I know I've had to do it. But there's something about being very purposeful and going, in this farming operation, we need bookkeeping and accounting. We need agronomy. So you have the roles, and then you go, oh my goodness, I have no choice but to wear these multiple hats.
That may not be a full role, but you combine that role and that role. Perhaps
Yeah.
it's finance and HR. Maybe that makes sense.
But what am I doing to make sure that I'm qualified for that role? If you think of them as roles, oh my goodness, I need to take a bookkeeping course, because at this point I'm not going to hire somebody. So this is actually a role. I need to take this serious. Is that right?
And by looking at that structure and building out those roles, you are professionalizing your business nicely. And whatever that means to you, the level of detail, the level of sophistication, it has to be appropriate for you and your people and your operation. Where families struggle a bit is the advancement and possibly leadership roles.
Ooh.
Who's going to manage?
Yes.
Who's going to drive this business?
The family circle says my children are equal and I love them equally. The
They
business circle says you got to earn your way through here.
And
However,
prove your muster.
how will we select the next leader? If you believe somebody needs to lead or be the president or the chief.
And sometimes families make mistakes in that, Tracy. I have a blog called Being Fired on the Farm, which was quite controversial.
Ouch.
But I have a situation of a family where the eldest brother was the one who was deemed to be the next generation on the farm, and it didn't work out, and he was fired from the farm. And his younger brother actually had the skill set that Brent is telling about that was actually working better towards leadership and management development. But again, you and I have done another interview on the culture of the farm, which is what you believe, how you behave, and how you decide. And I just want to remind your viewers about that, because the decision-making process is something that needs to be taught and caught by the next generation. And in my world, when it's collaborative, that the older generation is mentoring and having open discussions and full financial transparency with the younger generation, there'll be a lot of good management training just in the old 4-H way of learning to do by doing, because they're actually allowed to do it. But what really concerns me is when I see a 40-year-old who says, Elaine, I still can't write checks.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
And so then there's been more of a dictatorial kind of management style, rather than what I call that shoulder-to-shoulder equal teamwork approach to how can we both make each other better.
Well, and I'm going to go on a limb here. There is a strong skill set that needs to be developed to grow, manage, and maintain any business. And if the previous generation made it and didn't go out of business, they had that skill set. I wonder, I'm sure you guys have heard of that shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. Is that the reason why we see that there isn't the proper mentoring and training? Because if somebody got to 40, 50, 60 and hadn't been involved in that, and you throw them the keys, oh my goodness, there's so many places a business can go wrong, like cash flow, like there's just so much.
So you might want to dispel it may be a myth that you have had to start from scratch and you've had to experience the same pain and trials that I have. Yes. I walked to school both ways uphill.
Okay, well maybe I went through those, so I'm in my personal experience.
So the one thing and I try to emphasize this, is that you, founding generation, you took your business or your farm from here to here. It took a set of skills, and it took all of the drive that you had and the wisdom that you had, and you've developed a lot of wisdom. Your children are going to have to take it from here to here, or step back and take it to here.
Good point.
The skills that they need are going to be different.
Right.
Agriculture is probably one of the fastest developing industry sectors in the world right now. And they need a skill set that's totally different from what their parents
Lots
had.
of critical thinking.
Yes, and
point.
adaptive thinking and disruptive thinking, because their industry is being disrupted.
And tolerance for risk.
Oh.
So they need to develop those skills differently. Now there's a wisdom that the parent generation has that needs to be transitioned to the next generation, and a work ethic and a philosophy and value systems. But those skill sets to run that business and to grow it, they're going to be different.
So the Australians have a saying, common sense, uncommon practice.
Okay.
And so just even with what we're talking about, the skill sets and transition planning, I still want us to also think about the basic things. So really good communication, really good ability to do conflict resolution, which will help with decision making, and taking care of making sure the affairs, the financial affairs and documents of the family are in order as a form of business risk management. So for instance, last night I was speaking to a group, and they're quite high profile and considered to be doing amazing things in agriculture, and yet still some of them don't have a will in place.
Wow.
And so that's not common sense, Tracy. And so even as we see, as Brent says, agriculture changing and lots of skill sets being changed, which is true, we still need to also have wisdom in how we make those decisions.
Excellent. And that was a lot of wisdom. Thank you, guys. That's awesome. Okay, I want to change pace a little bit, and I want to ask some tough questions. Because, I kind of go the old enough but young enough, and I see things from different shoes. Try and be empathetic, right? So we have Generation 1. Founders, parents, grandparents, whoever we want to call them, the people that have the control right now. And we have the next generation that's coming up. Why? Oh, I'm full of loaded questions today. I'm putting you guys on the spot. But what are some of the biggest barriers that cause Generation 1 to not transition plan? Loaded question. Is it dollars? Is it control? What do you guys see? Lack of knowledge?
I'll start.
Yes.
Because we have a bit of a mantra in that first generation, when they're looking at transition or succession, they have 3 fears.
Okay.
They may fear a loss of wealth.
Yes.
They may feel that the next generation is not prepared, or they're spendthrifts and not penny wise, and they don't have the discipline that they have had in order to grow it. So a bit of old thinking, but still wisdom, good wisdom. And so they may fear a loss of wealth.
Okay.
They're not secure financially. They may fear the loss of control.
I wondered.
They have built, or they've participated in the building of the business. They have, their self-esteem is based on their position in the business and the success of the business, and they identify with that. That's important to them.
Yes.
That your parents are still humans. They
Yes.
have egos, they have all of the things that everybody has.
That's their identity.
Yes.
Who are they if they don't farm?
And if they're not in control, then really what are they? And they haven't prepared themselves for that next stage in life, the fulfilling in life. So the loss of control is one, but the very biggest factor is the fear of conflict.
Oh,
Yeah.
you nailed them. You nailed exactly what I thought they would be.
Nobody wants their family to go into conflict because of money, because of business, because of something that they have done improperly in transition. That's why we spend so much time working families through it, and based on values and vision, and then getting into the technical areas afterwards.
And it's also, again, a mindset shift, Tracy, because he said fear of conflict. So I say procrastination and conflict avoidance is killing agriculture. I've said that for years.
Yes.
And conflict avoidance, if you switch that around, saying what conflict behaviors, what can we do constructively, would move us forward towards getting what we all want. Because when Brent and I facilitate a family, we're working really hard, he very much strategically and me very much on the conflict side, to help the family figure out what everybody wants and to get clear about their expectations. So conflict avoidance can be shifted into, what's your perspective? What's your perspective? How can I help you get what I want? And so if you change your mindset to, we're not going to avoid this conflict anymore, we're actually going to embrace it, and we're actually going to work through it. Because if we do that, we've just really become really good risk managers, because conflict is not going to be that obstacle anymore. So you see, I'm a little bit Irish and I don't mind a good fight, but the goal of the fight is to come to resolution. And I'm a mom, and every mother I know who's a farm mom wants family harmony.
Yes.
And so they get frozen with the fear of, well, if we do this, is this just going to blow up the family?
Yeah.
Well, that's why you need professionals to help you walk alongside to navigate that process so that you are going to have a good outcome.
I sometimes wonder, when you hear, I know farm families been through it, and when you hear all these stories, we know there's tension on farms. We're humans. Everybody has their own agenda, their own plans, and just because we're not talking about it doesn't mean everything's good. There's a black cloud over our heads. There's weights on our shoulder. But sometimes I find that we're uncomfortable with our current situation. But if we start talking about it, we're scared of the conflict that's going to happen. But if you step back and you look at it, really, how smooth are most farm families operating right now anyways? We're just comfortable in our current state of family, whatever we want to call that, right? Where what I'm trying to get at is we avoid it because we think it's going to be uncomfortable. But really, how comfortable are we here anyways? Why don't we just go over the edge and start talking about it, right? Because there's so much tension here.
But that creates anxiety and overwhelm. So I have surveyed 240 of my farm families on my list. And we came up with 10 patterns of why families are stuck, Tracy.
Okay.
And the first one, and it's not in contrast to what Brent said. What Brent said is very, very true. But anxiety and overwhelm, it's the pain of not knowing. It's being, in coaching terms, we call it being in the neutral zone. It's not knowing what the future holds. It's not knowing, like this 40-year-old dairy farmer we just met, just found out that he now has some security. But that was because they went through the BDO process and figured out, there's a tax advantage for dad to have these kinds of shares. But he's 40 years old.
Yeah.
And so the anxiety and the overwhelm of not knowing how to start, and also, like you say, the conflict. But what I'm trying to get across is conflict is not bad. It needs to be navigated. And talking about tough issues means coming from curiosity and having the intention that we're all here for the common good. What is it we all want on this farm family? We all want to be successful. We all want to have enough wealth and income stream. And we actually want to have fun doing this.
We want to have a connected family that
Yes.
loves each other.
Yes.
So conflict resolution can be a learned skill.
Yes.
And so part of the process is learning how to manage conflict and objectively look at our differences of opinion and try to come to a resolution. Conflict is necessary.
Yes.
It's critical to evolution, to innovation. You have to have different ideas. But the conflict does get emotional in a family situation and even in unrelated people. So resolving conflict is a learned skill. You can build structures to help you with that. Very qualified people like Elaine can help families do that. The other part to try to mitigate conflict, or at least make it constructive, is to build the structures.
And have good structures in place.
So the business maybe needs a board of directors and it needs a management team that have a professional way to go about communicating and making decisions and resolving differences of opinion. The trouble is that family circle overlaps and it has a little bits of emotional trigger in it.
Hooks, buttons.
When I was 12 years old.
Oh, let's not go there. We're going forward.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the family dynamic, right? You're always you're the daughter, and then you're the business partner, but there's still those things.
When the conflict starts to override good communication and starts to erode trust, that's when families may look at somebody to come in and help them.
Right.
It's not a psychological evaluation, it's not a judgment,
No.
it's just helping you develop good conflict resolution and management styles and structures.
And I actually have a conflict dynamic profile that your viewers can do online to find out how good they are at the positive behaviors and then also work on understanding what their triggers are. So I don't like it when people don't talk because I can't read minds. Nobody can. And I also don't like it when people are unreliable. And so, knowing that, then I know why I'm getting triggered in a conflict situation if my hot buttons have been pushed. So again, it's learning, and what Brent alluded to right from the beginning of this presentation, and in terms of understanding yourself. And so the more you understand yourself, the better you show up for doing business well in your family.
Excellent. Well, and really too, we talk a lot about conflict, but even one step before that is just the communication.
Yes.
And I know many farm operations don't have that communication, like you said. Oh, he knows. Dad knows what I want. Oh, son knows what I want. Mom knows what I want, right?
everybody falls back on the bucket of communication, but communication comes in many different forms, and the business communication requirements are different than the family communication requirements. Very much so, and you have to look at them kind of separately and build them differently.
And have a plan for it.
And they may have different leaders and different people that actually spark the communication. That's okay. They're different systems. And so being very purposeful on how you communicate in business and how you communicate in family can help a lot with the resolution or at least the management of conflict.
So a practical application of what Brent just said is a dairy farm that I worked with in the lower mainland in Fraser Valley in BC. Every Wednesday, first Wednesday of the month is operational for that dairy farm.
Okay.
And it's always from 9 o'clock in the morning till 11 in the morning, first Wednesday of the month. Third Wednesday of the month is always the strategic one because there's 4 kids who want to all be part of this family business. So once a month they are concretely blocking time to work on the strategy of the vision of the transition of the farm. And that's very good because they've separated operations from strategy on the business side. Now when they want to decide things of as a family, that's called a family council. That's a totally different meeting. So it's just it's just putting labels on things, and some millennials love that kind of thing, and they like to be very concrete in, we can only spend this much time. And Dr. Cole's research in 1990s found out that if you have regular communication in a formalized way, you're 21% more profitable. So what would that look like on your farm this year if you actually started blocking out time to have really robust communication?
Couple things. In order to run a good business, you need to have meetings.
Yes.
Nobody likes meetings.
Don't call them that.
Meetings are not productive, they're not profitable, they're not driving the business. So, but let's go back to fact number 1. In order to run a business, you have to communicate and have meetings. So the best thing to do is get very, very good at meetings.
Okay.
Get the issues on the table, vet them, discuss them, make a decision, and follow through.
Focus and execute.
Yep. Get good at it.
I love that. Even on our operation, it's Anthony and I. And I'm a firm marketer. I do business meetings with clients. I do it with my team. We have marketing meetings, sales meetings, all those kind of meetings. I'm even to the point where, silly enough, if we want to call it that, I want to wear a different hat with Anthony when we're talking about the farm. Because sometimes
I can get you one.
Yeah,
I'll make you one.
And it sounds silly, but it's just a mind change. If every first Saturday of the month, like you said, Anthony, we're going to talk about the farm. It's purposeful, it's planned, it's consistent, but I'm also showing up as his business partner.
And you're getting prepared for that.
And not his wife, right?
And Thursday night is date night, so that's when the communication shifts.
Yeah, and then the next night you make up for the business fight.
That's right.
I'm joking.
Bad.
No, it isn't. I call that communication, right? Mm-hmm. Communication's smooth, communication's rough, but we gotta communicate.
That's right.
I love it. There was so much great stuff in there.
So I'll ask your viewers to now stop and rewind their video and play that one again, that little segment, because that was there was a lot of stuff there.
Communication. Yeah, I think that sums it up. So we are going to work to wrap up the session here. And I'm going to put you guys on the spot a little bit. You shared so much good stuff, some tough questions here. Do you guys have any final thoughts to farm families? You see somebody out there, they're watching. You can just tell them one thing each. You guys get to tell them one thing each. What are you going to tell that farmer over there that might not be doing XXX?
I don't have any captured words of wisdom. Transition planning is very necessary. It's critical for the survival of your farm, the next generation's legacy, and in your success. And at some point in time, you're either going to do it on your own terms, or it's going to happen for you.
I love that.
And
yes.
So your best option is to do it soon, and do it in an orderly, planned way, involving your family in the segments they need to be involved in, involving the people that are going to be part of the business in the segments they need to be done. and make it happen. Take the action. Consider it as a critical part of your job, and you make time for that. And it needs to be as important as breeding your herd or planting your crops. Just as it's probably more important. So you need to make time for that. And then guess what? Once you're done, it starts again. So what you're creating is a culture of transition. You're always prepared for transition, and transition means change. So all the things that you do to prepare yourself for a transition is, as Elaine said, risk management, preparing for change.
Excellent.
And I would say to the farm families listening, be curious, be a learner, and take charge. And my heart goes out to those of you who are young farmers, because I see a lot of frustration with things not moving fast enough. So what can you do? And the last line I would get people to think about is, I think, I feel, I need, I want. I think it's time we got serious about transition planning. I feel hopeful that there's a path for us to take, but I need us to make decisions, and I want us to start meeting on next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. So I think, I feel, I need, I want is you expressing very deeply how important this process, this project is. And as Brent says, it's a journey. I'm on my third succession plan, Tracy.
Wow.
I've done it once with my in-laws, once with my parents who were farmers, and now I'm doing it with our family.
Good for you.
And so I'm walking the talk just like you are, and it's important that we just keep the process moving.
Excellent. Those were amazing words of wisdom. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. Our
Excellent.
pleasure.
And thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.